Steve Isdall on his channel Facts by How to Hunt for mentioning my channel in an email, read online. I hope, and several people have come and subscribed. Thank you for joining my channel. I hope that some of this information will be very pertinent for you guys because you have a background in tracking, and you'll, which is crucial. Research into these people. So again, Steve Isdall, and thank you, Facts by How to Hunt. So the current area I'm hiking in ranges between 700 feet and about 1,500 feet. The first primary location sits right around 900. The area that I scouted today is right around that 1,100 maybe. A lot of crossover up there. Filmed another marriage tree up there. So the characteristic that most stands out there currently for me is a V canyon, little one, between two hilltop ridges. It's got a nice little echo point. And I heard some language use there after I said, before I started my film, I said a greeting in Japanese to see if the people up there that are in the woods speak Japanese or not. Which was Konnichiwa Matake. Konnichiwa Matake means good afternoon, friend, but it's more like a ally friend, is the meaning of it. So after I turned my camera off on my phone, after filming the marriage tree, I got the words, as I was leaving, walking down the hill, Ohayo gozaimasu, which is good morning, very formal in its tenses. So the people up there speak Japanese. Additionally, the previous soundbite that I put up of language, hoyu yate, means another person to chase. The word that I spoke over is most likely the creature and or critter's name that I covered up. And if it's that funny yowling cat up there, it's not a cougar. So those of you who are paying attention know what kind of a cat I'm referring to. Evident by the jelly bean-shaped pad and the very, very round toes. Not a cougar track. Cougars have a track very much like a house cat, just bigger. So, and that side has the echo bowl. And it was very close to the echo bowl where I heard the cat yowl. And then it was just the next hillock over past a little stream that the language was recorded while I was, recording the broken marriage tree. Hey Ben, how you doing? How you guys doing? Hey Purple. So right now there's not a lot of foliage, which is very nice because you can see all the crossover evidence really easily. So on the ridgeline hillside that I scouted today, there's a ton of crossover. A lot of grass trails. So far I haven't found too much deer sign, but I know they're in the area because it's a great area for them. But the trails that I've been finding are flat. They're just pressed down in the grass. If you've got deer, you'll get the little spiky points and you get drag and all that. And so far across the grass, it's all flat-footed. Pad-footed is what I call it. Because of the way Sabe walk. They spread their feet out, kind of pad the ground down. And I found a couple of very narrow rabbit trails going off through the woods up there too. Also very well known as Sabe trails. A lot of people are familiar with that single foot placement. But that's usually a traveling trail that they go down multiple times. The other kind of flat worn in the grass, those are foraging trails, as are the wider, flat trails padded down. They're 2-3 foot wide. Not like that cougar trail. That also seems to have some bear passover, because there's kind of a wobble. So cougars and bears will follow the same paths. because usually they're also following game paths or crossing game paths like deer or elk, etc. So, a lot of birds up there. Some good forest trees that are edible. There are white pine up there. The nuts off of those are edible, and the needles can be used for tea. And it's also a medicinal tree. And the other lower ridge line, where the bowl is got a lot thicker foliage on it than the second hill today. What's up top there is quite open until you get down into that little V gully. And it seems to have one specific echo point, unlike the echo bowl, which I think you can get 3 or 4 directions out of, depending on which way you face and which way you point your head when you're making the call. And I found another trail that goes up another 1,500 feet to the west of here. So, that will be exploration probably for next weekend. I've got to go back into the lower bowl area tomorrow and refilm that location. Oh, and the weird thing I noticed with the speaking today, the individual was very aware of the fact that I had a recording device and that I was recording. So they've seen people use a phone enough times that they don't speak when you're on the phone. It's polite. And since they're formal and polite, that's why that occurs. Now, what's going on down in the Echo Bowl area, my guess, my suspicion, I should say, is if they're keeping a pet, the individual handler, the owner of that pet, is training it or teaching it. And if it is not a pet that is being taught or trained, which I doubt, it's another Sabe child. But they manage their own herds of animals. And in doing so, they train all of them, or if they're trainable, depending on what they are and what they want them to do. Otherwise, they manage them in locations where you don't know about them. And occasionally one will get loose, and you might catch it on your door camera, or ring camera, or on a property camera of some kind, or exterior camera. But not always, depending on how they move and what they do. So the Echo Bowl location, uh, where I was at on the little hang point was about 200 feet away from where that gurgle growl thing happened, the animal sound. And I won't call it a call because that would suggest that it would be somebody making that sound instead of an animal. It's its own vocalization. It's not anything mimicking it, my guess. And then the language was maybe another 300 feet down the trail and closer. Because it was only 80, 100 feet behind me, max, when it was talking, probably closer than that. And if I can get myself in between those 2 points, or if I can get that pet to chase after my dog and I, ha ha ha. By the way, nobody's gone missing in that area. And there are a ton of hikers that are always up there during the day. And I've been up there at night in the past. I just forgot because it was back in the flippin' 80s when I went up there with some friends of mine. But I wasn't going on the lower trail, I was going up on top. So I have heard that sound in that area before, I just had to think about it for a while. So if I can get that thing to be attracted to me, and if I position myself within that, 100-foot range between the 2 locations, just down from the Echo Bowl, there's a good chance I will be able to get more calls and more language, or more organic sounds from the individuals in the woods that you cannot see. That's another way of potentially putting it, which would be really beneficial for further research on the language. But a heavy suggestion is Japanese for these people. And I did ask if they were Skakam or Namahugi, and that's when I got the Ohayo gozaimasu back at me. It was right after I asked that. I maybe got 30 feet down the trail before I got a good morning. So it also means that that individual got up late, because I was out there around 1:30, 2 o'clock today. Afternoon for me, not technically, because it's still my morning. I got up at noon. That person and I have a very similar night schedule, it seems, potentially, because of the way the language is used. Uh, so that's a good sign. It means I'll be out there in the field when it's an appropriate time to be around them. They'll be up and active and moving around. And the other bull area is the same way, time wise, and movements during the day. So um, I haven't explored further down in that bowl area. I have heard a couple of knocks down past where the broken top tree is. Um, so I still have to go down there. I figure it's another probably mile down there, maybe half mile if I'm lucky, before I'll hit a zone where there's going to be another individual interacting with upper bowl, lower bowl, lower echo point and upper bowl. Because there was also a whoop from that area. Oh, and I want to say something about whoops. The reason why I made the statement that only dogmen make that whoop is because that's the only one I can verify with a sound recording of another animal. Spotted hyena. And a whoop out of an individual cryptid of any kind, the only time I've ever seen the action happening was when a dogman was whooping in the area where my friend had had his fight with one. I saw it come out of the, brush line on the corner of my eye, and as I turned to look at it, it whooped. So that's the only one I've been able to visually confirm makes the whoop. I'm positive, 100%, the other, cryptid people do as well. It's just that's the only one I physically see do it. And that's the one I'm comfortable saying, yeah, I'm 100% sure that Dogman whoop because I flippin' saw one do it at about 3 in the afternoon during the summer, this past summer, in fact. Spring, actually, June, I think it was. May, June, somewhere in there. I have heard whoops in both the bowl area, and then yesterday there was a peculiar incident, and then last night there was that gurgly, funny cat call again, up behind where this place is, and very close to the trailhead area as far as I can tell from, where the sound came from and where I was today. It has to be either in that gully or at the trailhead area. Because it was at about 700-foot level. So I'm assuming it was at the bottom of that bowl where that cat is at night. But it's, or in the bottom of that ravine, not bowl. But he's in the bowl area during the day. So, two different patterns for two different times of day, which is normal. I also suggest that the individual that it belongs to is working back and forth between those two areas. And the 1,500-foot point to the west, I've heard knocks and whoops from up there throughout this past summer. And that's why I want to go investigate that. So overall, probably 2 to 3.5 miles of trail systems that there's activity along. And it's all normal hiking trails, and no, there's nobody that's gone missing up there. But it's all national forest, and there's a few areas where you walk through, like farmland or backs of people's homes because the property line's just right there on the trail. So if people were going missing, and if these people were dangerous, the people in the woods, Sabe, there had been a lot of problems up there. So that suggests to me that some of the behaviors that people are running across are, again, either misinterpreted or caused by some action, or they're so unfamiliar with the reasons for the thing to be done, the action to be made, or the sound to be made, that, an escalation of issue occurs and everybody freaks out. So let me grab my glasses. I'm going to answer a few questions, and then I'm going to grab the email. I have two phones, one for my email and one for my YouTube channel. Hey Jason, how you doing? Hey Jay, R7, hello. Yeah, Villa, we're talking about Bigfoot. The reason why I use the term Sabe for Bigfoot is because in the native mindset, Sabe is a term for your forest brothers, the individual Bigfoot family groups that assist humankind, assist us, hairless monkeys. And if we are referring to the predatory style Bigfoot or species, we call them red bone people because they're cannibalistic and incredibly vicious when inappropriately acted around. And you have to be very careful of them. They're very cunning. You can move around them to a degree safely, uh, but you cannot, you cannot intrude upon their lands inappropriately or piss them off. Once you do that, you're pretty well screwed. Just to be straightforward. Okay, Ben, is this area not be bisected by public trails? It's actually got two roadways through it. One at about thirds. So there's two roadways, and the trails that I'm on are all hiking trails that are public hiking trails, actually. Yes, they are on maps. Jason, Ruth, John Stuart Mill, 1803, 73, Liberty consists in doing what one desires. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I'm glad you know your history. I'm sorry, Mike, that you're addicted to gambling. That sucks. It's a terrible way to waste your money. Justin, it's nice to see you looking in good health. Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better. Melissa, good evening from Chile. Yeah, I feel you. I've seen the weather's getting pretty cold there and pretty gnarly. Hey, Dolly. Jason Ruth, are the Sabe also in Africa as well? Yeah, I would assume that Bigfoot is everywhere on this planet, just as we are. Wherever we're at, they're at. I wouldn't doubt it for a second. And besides, there's way too much lore, you know, traditional tribal lore from all over the world that tells stories about different kinds of critters like this, you know, what you describe as Bigfoot or porcupine people or you name it. Uh, they're everywhere. And they've been around us forever. We've been around them forever. Uh, it's just that in the last couple of 100 years, that knowledge has been more or less drowned out and lost. That they've been here forever and that we live near them. So when people are talking about habituating them, uh, wrong angle. You can't habituate a human. A human either chooses to interact with you or they choose not to. So that's not a term I would use when talking about the Sabe, because it's not really relevant, to be honest. So let me grab that email. We'll see how far I can get through this. And I don't really have reception on this phone, so I had to take snapshots of uh, the email. So I'm going to have to read from my snapshots. Okay, Ben, I asked because somewhat by chance I picked an area on level ground crossed by public trail and connected to a ridge that few of us would want to bushwhack up unless hunting for mushrooms, etc. That sounds like a pretty good location, Ben. Sounds like you got a good potential there. Because there are certain land lays that are more prevalent. You know, the certain areas have more activities simply because of the nature of the area, the land lay of it, the height, you know, how what its elevation is, and then what it offers. Are there streams? Are there springs? Are there echo bowls? Are there echo ravines? Are there ridge lines? You know, there's certain characteristics definitely uh, preclude finding Bigfoot and Sabe in them because that's their habitat. That's where they prefer to live. That's and some of these areas are very easy to live in. Marshes are another one. Marshes and marshlands, wetlands. They love that because there's lots of food there, and there's tons of cover. So those types of locations are usually the easiest to get interactions in, and to do groundwork. Look for tracks. Once you figure out where they are moving, it's pretty easy to find tracks. And then also looking for your ground support, your stick evidence, your kana, kanji, movement sticks, brake sticks, all of that stuff. Your stone markers. Those will all be in little cleared areas. Sometimes right near your path, sometimes on your path. I find a lot of kana and kanji on walking trails. It's one of the easiest ways for me to grab kana and kanji, which is their language, in written form. And that's what my grandmother claimed the stick Indians were. Stick Indians weren't people made out of sticks that moved around. It was the fact that they wrote in sticks on the ground. That's why we call them stick Indians. Stick Indians. That's how my grandmother said it. It's not derogatory. It just means it's forest brother. Okay, and then where I found several different signs. One in particular was a piece of vine wrapped around a branch. Yeah, it could be a marker. It could be a leftover climb thing too, or it could be a place where they've hung vines to tie up bundles with. So when the men are hunting, they will use slats of bark that are 6-8 inches across and a foot or two long, depending. Usually about 2 feet in length. And when they catch game, like squirrels or bigger birds, like duck, etc., they will make a bundle. They'll put the carcass of the animal on the piece of bark, and they'll have laid down usually ivy vine, or I've seen them use honeysuckle. I've also seen some areas where they use raspberry vine. They'll lay that down first, then they'll lay the pieces of bark down, then they'll lay the carcasses of the different animals, and they'll roll that bundle all up and tie it up, and then they put a stick across for a handle, like a little suitcase for lunch. Um, because the men, when they forage during the day, they're bringing home dinner in the afternoon, while their women are down in the ravines, gullies, and marshlands collecting roots, berries, or other goods, mushrooms, etc., and teaching their young. They collect different types of food, and the females typically will ball their food. So instead of making the little bundle with slats of bark and animals, they will make a ball out of vine, kind of like a gorilla does. And they put their smaller critters, because they also will still catch mice and birds and voles and stuff like that. But they'll also put, the pine cones or nuts, berries. Sometimes they'll have a basket with them. They'll make a rudimentary basket, and they'll put smaller items that are really fragile, like berries or flowers, because they collect a lot of flowers to eat as well. And their greens. They'll put that in the basket. And if they do make a food ball, then it will be things like sword fern root balls, because those are edible. You can roast them and eat them. Or cattail ends. They taste kind of like cucumber. because the root's real thick and has a lot of texture to it, moisture to it. Fennel bulbs, they'll collect fennel bulbs because you can eat fennel, and those will be in their little ball when they make them. And then they've got their basket of the more perishable, fragile items, flowers, etc. And I have seen all of these kinds of items in my life or found evidence of them. I have pictures of only a food ball, though, and the remnants of one. I have seen the others, and I'm aware of them. I just have to be able to find a location where I can find them again. Um, a lot of time you'll find the food bundles with the bark slats on hilltops or ridge point where there's a little bit of cover, but not a lot of sun, and usually in thicker older trees where it stays cool, even in the summer. So there's a, you got to learn where to find the items. The baskets you'll find down in the marshes if you're lucky and you can find where the females foraging that day. And when they're getting ready to all go home, because they each husband and wife and their kids go out in different foraging areas within their natural terrain, their homeland, their hunting grounds, and they have their collection route where they collect their food every day. And then the whole group, and this, family group can be 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 individuals, sometimes more. But 10 to 30 is about average from what I've seen. After they hit 30 individuals, they have a tendency to split the group, and then they'll just kind of bubble off and be right next. It's the next hunting grounds over, kind of thing. So they spread out in their territory and fill in the space, kind of like just in circulars and bubbles off that original circle. So that's how they maintain fresh foraging areas, and they do understand stress on the environment. They do understand if they overhunt, they're going to lose game. If they overforage, they're going to lose, primary food sources. They're aware of that. That's why they also do some cultivation and farming, because they do some rudimentary forms of that as well. Termite farms, where they'll take fallen, old, rotten logs and they'll stack them around a rotten stump to encourage termites to come into the stacked logs. And those structures can get pretty big. The biggest one I've seen was about 30 feet in diameter with an old growth stump in the middle of it. And it was it's completely secluded. You could be 10, 20 feet away from it and you would not see it, nor would you see the two openings in it. It was built in two spirals, and it was vine covered with living growth. So it was a completely hidden structure that was completely open on the inside. You could walk around on the inside. It was about 4 foot, 5 foot, all the way around it on the inside, so it was a good wide path to get in and out. But there was no way to find it. That was the spot I lost my dog Caesar in. I had to go find him because I couldn't figure out where he was in the bush line. I couldn't see him, and then I caught just a glimpse that, hey, there's some stacked logs. What the heck is in there? What? I gotta go find out. So I hopped off the trail and found out. Found my dog. And then there's, they'll do the whole rotten stump thing. They'll take a small cut stump or a rotten stump or a fallen tree, and they'll encourage certain kinds of, woody mushrooms to grow on the new stump that they're transferring to. So, there's a little bit of cultivation that way. And I have also noticed that they will take, edible mushrooms and they'll break them up and spread them. A portion of what they don't take, they reseed the ground with to keep encouraging the mushrooms to come into the area. So they actually practice rudimentary forms of cultivation, which is not an animal behavior. There's no other primate other than us that actively cultivates the ground around them in any way. And they do understand also a bit about arboretum, planting small trees, but it's a rare thing to see that one happen. But I have seen it happen. And I've also seen where they've transferred, good edible plants or medicinal plants. Occasionally they will transfer them from one location to another. Uh, Rare that I've seen it, but I have seen it. Again, that also suggests that, they are cultivating what's in their territory, not just hunting it out. So again, that's not animal or, you know, greater primate behavior. It's far more human behavior. Let me answer a couple more questions here. Hey Ben, that's a cool sign. Yes, yes it is. So obvious where it was. About 2 feet, small, string-like, ready to go for, yep, another day in the area. Yeah, you'll see that quite a bit. The other thing that I noticed when they're leaving vines around that they're going to use, you'll find a coil. You'll find, sometimes 20, 30 feet of vine just coiled up and laid on the top of a log or broken stump or hanging in a tree. I've seen that a couple of times too, but it'll be like 12, 15 feet up that they hang that stuff. So yeah, you'll see that sort of thing in areas where they're actively foraging. I know that they cook meat. Uh, you, you scared Jody. I know that they cook meat. I've found in the past, I found locations where they've cooked deer on the ground, open fire on the ground, and there was suggestion that they had rolled the animal back and forth to roast it. And that particular group did not skin the animal before they cooked it, but they did shave the hair off a bit because I found little, chunks of deer hair in a pile. And I found the tool that had been used. It was a bone tool that had been used to cut the outer hair off of it. And then I'm assuming, because there was also still a singed hair smell to it, and it was a buck because there was, an antler base that had been roasted in the fire, still evident. So they cooked the animal whole. They did not skin it. Uh, I'm not sure if they gutted that one. I think it was gutted because I didn't smell gut in the ashes. I'd found it the following morning after the animal had been cooked. So, all the scents were still very pungent in the area. Even at 3, 4 feet, you could still smell all the dynamics there of what had happened. So, I have seen that evidence, and more than once I've seen found the piles of deer hair or bear hair sometimes will be shaved off that way and just left in a big pile. So that's one of the signs that they're cooking food in the area. They don't cook their fish. They'll eat the fish raw, but they will cook deer. And I know that they will, some groups, especially the women, will boil broths because that was something my grandmother spoke of, and it was something that Jen Jen, the Oma Bigfoot female on our ranch, spoke of. They make bone broth, they make herbal broths, and they make broths from tree goods like pine needle stuff, very much like indigenous people. And sometimes they will add berries or currants or some other things to the broth, also little herbs and stuff. So they actually have some cooking skills that people aren't aware of, and do that sort of thing pretty regularly. They're not animalistic in their dietary behavior. They don't just rip something apart and eat it. That's more, red bone and that sort of thing. They do a lot more of that kind of activity than what I know as the Sabe. Our Forest Brothers are, their mentality is a little bit different. Although, the Sun Pigs people, they still cook their food. Because I used to watch the small family group from the top of their ridge line, because they had a little camp. Their bed system, their home grounds were about 30 feet down in a flatbed area, overlooked a nice little river, and then there was the ridge line behind. And if I was really, really careful and I was very, very quiet, I could sit up on that ridge line and watch them for 15, 20 minutes without being noticed. But then, eventually I'd get noticed and I'd have to leave. So there are things that you can do to get in and watch and see those people, but you've got to be careful. Once the sun-based people or Gugways start coming towards you, it's better you just get out of the area. And there are certain things you cannot do in their area that will get you in trouble. Don't go into their areas. Don't go down into their bed systems. You probably won't get out of the bed systems. They're not as forgiving as the other, forest people. And the other is don't if they try to interact with you or offer you something, you have to be very, very careful of them. If they ever if they ever compromise you, for instance, lure you down into an area you need help getting out of because it's a slippery trail, blah, 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 or you're boxed in, and they put their hand out to offer you a hand up, do not take it. If you have a way of getting out of there any other direction, do so. Because a lot of the native stories that my grandmother retold were about how sun-faced people and Gugway would capture you. And they'd always compromise you and then offer you assistance. So keep that in mind if you're really getting in, getting close, and doing research. Yeah, there are certain things you can't do because it will get you caught, and they will, hold you like the Gugway did to Jen Jen. They'll imprison you. And they'll do what they want to you, uh, and sometimes you never get out of there because you don't know how to. You have to wait until they go to sleep, and then you have to belly crawl your ass the fuck out of the place because there's no other way to get away from them. You have to be able to sneak and move like they do, which was part of the training I went through. I had to learn how to move like these things, climb like them, and eat the same diet and forage in the same way. So I'd know how to be close to them and be around them and be safe about it, and then all the lore. So let me try to get to this email. See if this ever works. Okay. Okay, let me finish that. Cosmic, so... was that... Oh, wait a minute. Two more questions. Excuse me. Cosmic. Wow, so Dogman whoop. That's insanely interesting. I wondered what both Dogman and Sasquatch do equally. Yeah, that's why on the History of Language playlist of mine, that's why I put up the spotted hyena call. Whoop. Because they make a whoop very, very, very similar to the Dogman whoop. The only difference between the Sabe whoop and the Dogman whoop that's audibly different for hearing them is with the Bigfoot you get whoop, a real quick one, usually. With the Dogman you get whoop, a slightly longer with a diphthong in the middle of whoop in it. That's slightly different. It's very much like the spotted hyena. What do they make their pots out of? Clay, typically. And they're not real ornate or anything. They're basically... My grandmother used to watch the Yaren people that she grew up around and that she did her turnout with. She used to watch the women with the children making clay pots, and what she described was the woman would make a ball of clay, and they dig it straight out of the ground, usually near water, uh, where they were. There was a spring that had clay on one side, so they would dig the clay out of the spring, and they'd make a ball about 6-8 inches in diameter. And it wouldn't be really hard packed. It wouldn't be nice and even or anything. It's just, rudimentary. You squish it together. If some of it's falling apart, they don't care. They might pat the outside a little bit, but not much. And then they'd put the ball down on like cross-laid sticks or stones. And then they'd have the young ones uh, put their fist in it. And sometimes, the female would hold the ball of clay while the young one punched down into the clay to make the center hole. Sometimes the women would pinch the sides a little bit, but not much. And then that would be, they'd let that pot sit for 3, 4, 5 days, let it dry out so they could use it to cook. and they don't use any glaze. They didn't do any other secondary preparation to it other than just, you know, drying it out and then cooking with it. So those pots are not fired per se. They're very rudimentary, and they, according to my grandmother, do fall apart. You know, they can use them for a while, and if the pot gets too hot, it will break, or if it gets overused and it's left wet, it will degrade, because that's what happens with the low-grade firing. To fire clay, you have to get it up to 2,000 degrees. They don't build a fire that hot. So it's not really, it's fire-hardened clay more than anything. But they still utilize them to cook in. And they do have a little, they have a way of making their little cooking ovens in the ground. It's like a Native American ground oven, where you put a fire hole, just you bore a hole straight down into the ground, and usually these are on hillsides, and then you bore an air vent from the other, the bottom side in. So you set your pot on top, and then you feed your fire through the hole in the bottom. Uh, and I've got examples of both the cooking um, fire pit on my on my YouTube channel, and I did find an example finally this last summer of one of the clay pot types down from Cottage Grove Lake, London Trackway area. So there's that information on my webpage, or on this YouTube page already. I'll help you fill in those gaps for what you're looking at when you see it. Okay, Cosmic was actually going to ask the stick Indian question. So it's because of the sticks they place on the ground, what are typically called ground glyphs. Yes, those ground glyphs are actually kana and kanji. They represent words, sentences, can actually represent poems. Complete thoughts can be represented in those, and complete communications can be deciphered and translated back out of them. And you can actually, it's pretty easy to translate them, because you can actually use Google Lens to do it with, using the translate, take a picture. But you do have to transfer the pattern onto paper, and if you can't get a translation, you either have to turn the kana and kanji, because you can translate them in all four directions in some cases, in order to get a translation. Otherwise, you have to pull the overall kanji apart, because it's basically like ancient Ainu. So you have to pull the sections out and isolate the particular kana that make up the kanji, and then you can translate them. They really need a way of setting up a camera so I can walk through that process and show others exactly how to do that sort of thing. I do have some translation up where I have pulled the kanji apart, and some that are just straight kana translations. So I've got several examples of that sort of thing, and I've got to get more of that and try to teach more of that, so it's easier for people to grasp how to handle their language, because we've got a tool in our hands called the phone that will actually allow us to translate those kana, and you don't have to speak Chinese or Japanese or any ancient language to do it. You've got a device in your hand that will do it for you. And about 70% of their words and meanings are in the dictionary on the internet, in the phone's dictionary of words, lexicon of words. So there's very few that you won't be able to translate. When you do come across those that you can't, it's because it's a composite, and you have to pull it apart in order to translate it accurately. No, those aren't stick structures. The ones that lay flat on the ground, those are kana and kanji. They're just not using paper and ink. They're using bare dirt and sticks to write with, I should say. Yeah, Cosmic, that walking stick is actually a runner stick. So the individual that carries a walking stick that's a Bigfoot is actually on a mission. He's delivering a message, or going to pick up a trade on him. Typically, though, he's more delivering messages between groups. Sometimes he will be an individual used to ask for help or say, hey, we've got X amount to trade. What do you have in trade for it? He's an emissary of a type. That's what the function of the carrying the stick thing is for. I'm not sure if they know how to avoid the or radiation, uranium in clay pots. Um, Let me think if my grandmother said anything about that. I'll have to get back to you on that. I know she taught me how to identify that, because there are certain ways you can test clay by just, slicking it down so it's more fluid, and depending on how the clay acts in water, you'll know if it's got heavy metals or uranium in it, because it'll look like metallic paint. If it's got uranium in it, it will have that kind of metallic flow to it, and it will be thicker, kind of heavy material when you're dealing with uh, metal problems, that those clays will settle quicker to the bottom of your water. They won't float in the water as well. Those are the two basic, field tests you can do with no equipment. It's just visual and knowing what to look for. Okay. Okay, Cosmic, you mentioned in the last live stream that you did something wrong in their area and they were pissed off. What did you do? Well, that was actually out in the Aaron area, and it was back in 2020, 4 years ago now. I had gone in and I had destroyed a lot of their communications because well, I wanted to try to understand what their punishment might be. I also wanted to try to understand if I would get the doghouse, or if I would get fined, or if they would get aggressive with me. And the reason why is because that particular area there had been aggression issues in before uh, over the same sorts of behaviors. And they got aggressive. At least one of them did, because they got offended. But the family group, probably his little brother or sister, warned me out of the area before he got to me. And I stood my ground for longer than I should have. I was maybe 30 feet away from getting squished. So I wanted to know if the peculiar rumors about what had happened up in that particular region back in the 90s was true or not. There was a family of 4 individuals who were supposedly attacked in that area. And I saw the vehicle. I've got pictures of the vehicle, I think, somewhere in my computer. The vehicle got pretty well beat to hell. Glass got shattered but not broken out. The sides of it got crumpled, fist prints, kicking, that sort of thing. So the family group's children had made a huge mistake in their behavior, and they had destroyed something in that area that was very dear to the Sabe people, the Yaren up there. In that instance, they had thrown stone hearts off of a rock into a river, and that had incited a reaction because that's a memorial. Now, I know where that rock is. I've seen it. That's why I didn't choose to use the throwing the stone hearts anywhere. Why I chose to do it the other method, pick up and screw their kana and destroy their interactions and tell them, I verbally communicated with them kind of in a challenging way to get a reaction out of them. I wanted to see how far they would take it and why they would take it that far, so that I would have a good idea of what the boundary is. So what I had done earned me a year in the doghouse, and I had to trade without getting anything back. So they fined me. And that surrounding area from where the incident happened. 50 miles in any direction, bare minimum. I could not trade. I wouldn't get anything back. They'd take my goods, but they wouldn't give me anything back. So their flying area was pretty large. It means they have a lot of influence in this particular valley because it's a 100 miles radius in all directions from that central location. So that gave me a good idea of how far their trading routes went, which is another reason why I wanted to do the test. I wanted to see how much power and influence these particular groups have in an area. Do they have any? So after the year was over, I went back into the area because I had gone in and I promised I'm not going to be here for the year. I know I'm not welcome. After that year, I went back in. And it's one of the few times I've heard English being spoken up there. And the big male of the group, no, other way around. The mama of the group asked her husband up on the ridgeline, "Who's here?" when I came into the territory, meaning they'd both seen me, or potentially had seen me. And his response was, "It's fights anything, come to visit," basically. So they'd named me in the process, and they'd adopted me. So you always get a name when you're adopted. So sometimes that's how you can interact with them and become part of the forest people's families. You make a mistake and you know how to fix it and you follow the correct behavior, and then they'll name you and adopt you. So that group actually has quite a bit of influence in this area. Consequently, my name's been spread around and I've been adopted by a couple of different groups currently. And that was something that was pretty common a couple hundred years ago. With Native Americans, you would get adopted. That's the only way you could really do trade with them and, interact in a peaceable way and get their support in times of need was through the adoption process, or your brothers and sisters because you're adopted. That was very common practice. But you didn't have to go to that extent in those days. We still communicated with them and interacted with them, and that's why it was interesting to get the reaction that I got today, because they don't know my name in this particular group. They don't know my adopted name. But they acted as appropriate, response to an individual they respect. And that was the language, Japanese, speaking Japanese, and the answer of Ohayo gozaimasu. The gozaimasu, you can say Ohio, that's just good morning. You say that to anybody in your family. But if you're addressing a stranger and you want to be respectful, you say gozaimasu at the end of it. Otherwise, you're just talking congenially to your very close relations. So there is a level of formality with some of these, cryptid people. Sabe, they do have culture, and social mannerisms are very important. And they've got several layers of it. You can go and interact with the cough system and the knock system. You'll get the same. They'll interact with you. If you show that you can speak language, they'll speak language back at you. If you show that you can understand their kana and lay down kana, they will interact with you through kana. But you have to prove, they have to understand that you understand. And that's how you can achieve interactions that are viable. And that's why some researchers are going to have some difficulty because they're not looking for viable communication. They're looking for reaction. Tyrone. Well, cosmic stone hearts are used for males, yes. When Sabe marry, husbands and wives will find a heart-shaped stone or make a heart-shaped stone. The men sometimes will chip them and make them into a heart shape. But they'll find two heart-shaped stones, and when they marry, they give each other their mate's stone, the heart stone. That goes with them until their mate dies, and it's to signify that your heart is stone against all others. You will only be faithful to one individual, the person that you exchanged the stone heart with. So at their mate's death, be it that the wife dies first or that the husband dies first, that stone heart will be put on the memorial wall, and it will be either on a ridgeline or a big boulder sometimes, or a rock outcropping. I've seen them out in all places like that. So that's kind of like their wedding ring. That's why I don't ever pick up stone hearts that are flat and very heart shaped or look like they're chipped, because I know they belong to somebody. Or yeah, I might accidentally pick up a heart that belongs to somebody. I don't want to be responsible for getting married to somebody out in the woods that I don't know. So I'm always careful about not picking up stone hearts. I've been hiked with a group recently near Issaquah, Washington. Yeah, kept on the lookout for trail signs. Saw one thing among broken twigs of a downed tree by a storm across the trail. The strong sign clearly placed there. Nice. Good find, Ben. Yeah, strong symbol is one of the most common ones that you will find. I find that one everywhere. So that's a good basic starter. Learn the symbol for, or learn the kana for strong. You'll find it. That's also has the meaning that they have a strong trading relationship in the area, or when they're doing trades between group members, they'll always use strong as a base kana for any negotiation. So that's a good one to know. Okay, Cosmic, do you happen to know uh, what the symbolic meaning of the Y branch is? That is, branches of weeds or crisscrossed uh, each other naturally. Well, it's a symbol for Yaren, but it's also, let me think, because the trident is mountains, and I think the Y is also like wind, if I remember right. So there are some basic kana that I put up. I did a video uh, that outlines a few basic kana that you'll find pretty regularly. Kana for fire, strong, air, wind, those kinds of certain kinds of kana, water. You'll find those kanas a lot. So I've got a video up about the basic kanas that you'll find. There's about 10 of them that you'll find pretty regularly. And the fire kana is a Y with a cross stick on it, very much like the marriage trees look, but it's, slightly different. You'll also find the kana for eternity a lot. It's another one, or chi, which is the way they write it. It's a chi symbol. And that's also the word for it in Chinese. So you'll find, Chinese basic writing, you'll find Japanese basic writing, and you'll find the elemental Zen writings a lot. No, Dolly, I do not think. Do you think that it is common for long branches or weeds to crisscross each other naturally? No, it's not common. When I was up in Washington doing tracking up there, I found a very, very intricate spiral woven into a huge bush. It was a mountain currant bush. And the thing, it was actually a pair of bushes they grew into each other, so they were about 10 feet tall. It was marshland, so it was very, you know, good place for it to grow. And it had been there a long time because the base of the, you know, it was like 2, 3 inches across. And from a distance, you couldn't see that it was a spiral. It looked kind of like just a big circle. But when you got up into those bushes and you looked at them very closely, it was actually a woven spiral between the two bushes, like almost like a overly expressed yin and yang symbol, two spirals that wove inside of each other, and they were all pinned with grasses and pinned with little tiny vine sticks, and it was really beautiful when you got up and you took a real close look at it. But it wouldn't come out in a picture. It just looked like a big round O in pictures. It didn't look, camera lens couldn't catch the dimension of it. And I, at the time, didn't realize, I could have matted behind it and pictured it in an angle. There were some things I could have done to bring the pattern out. But it was such a big pattern. It was like 4 foot across and about 2 feet thick. And very open and lacy in its structure. Hey, Carl, are you, prejudiced against people with degenerative bone disease? Because you're making an awfully huge mistake in trying to assume anything about me. Okay, Cosmic. Are all Sasquatches Asiatic? Um, I don't know so much as they're Asiatic. I know that they speak Asiatic languages. They also do speak Urdu, which is Hindi. I've also found a couple of languages I didn't expect. There's some connection in some of their kind of to Spanish, to Basque, and I think there was another one. I got into some Arabic in a couple of the translations too. So there are quite a few different languages that some of their communications can be written in. A good portion of them are Asiatic, but every once in a while you'll run across those that speak completely different languages, and you'll still see the words written out in Kana, but the translation will be into another language. Uh, for instance, I'll find the Urdu writing for uh, Hegopla, which is Hindi words, followers of Krishna, worshippers of the cow, but you'll see it written out in Kana, though it is in Urdu, the ancient form of writing for India. So that one I've seen a couple of times, and it's been kind of an unusual thing to find, but it's still written with sticks, still written in the same kind of manner as a glyph. I haven't seen any Hebrew kana yet, and I don't know what ancient Aramaic looked like, but the Hindi language and the Arabic connections to it come up in their languages sometimes, at least up here. But I haven't been everywhere in the world and I don't know everything, so there's a possibility depending on their tribal group or their species. Because I have spoken to several people and gotten emails from a few people that do give some suggestion there's more than just Arabic connections, that there are potentially Aramaic and Hebrew. But don't read too much into that because I really believe that these people, the Sabe, have been all over this planet forever, and that they are potentially communicating in an original form of language that we've adapted, regionally adapted out. And we've carried the language with us as we've moved away from these people and no longer communicate with them. And they have become our primary language groups. Their ancient composite language has broken apart and become our language groups because there's just too much mixing of their language. So please don't go into the mythological end of things, uh, go into the historic end of it. If they have been everywhere and they've always spoken the same language, then the only languages that we know are potentially the languages that we learned from them. Because a lot of traditional stories and a lot of traditional lore from all over the world state that Bigfoot peoples from all over the world taught us humans how to use fire, how to make tools, how to read and write, how to hunt, etc. So we have may refined those elements, uh, but every culture around the world states that they were our teachers. They were our original people. They're who we came from in most of the traditional lores from around the world also. So take that as you may. I took some pictures around where I live the other week and took back notice anything. There's a lot of vibes of the kudzu through growing wildly in their own. Wow, that's how it would look like. Thin, thin dead tree with bark all off and the weeds in front of it and crisscross. Maybe, yeah, please email that to me. I have seen similar stuff. Was it a single, so I Dolly, was it a single tree that had been stripped of all of its branches, a little sapling, maybe 2, 3, 4 feet tall, and completely stripped of bark and branches, or was it just the bottom half stripped of bark? Because that one's animal predation potentially, and the other one is Sabe predation. Um, and then if there's the little grass emblem in front, it might be about what happened. Because it might have been an attempted marriage between groups that didn't work out, an arranged marriage. So the sapling will not be split. They'll strip all of the bark and branches off of it. But if it's animal predation, then only the bark around the bottom will be gone. The bottom like foot or so. But there wouldn't be a reason for the grass kana to be there. There'd just be crossover trailing from the animal that stripped the bark. So you gotta to think about that too. Or you can make it an endless video. Yeah, whichever you want to do. Just hey, salut, Chad. Just let me know, Ice Dolly, and I'll look at it. Okay, Cosmic, most recent video I have posted features ground glyphs, spiral. Wow, with spiral made with rocks. Has white heart stone in the middle. Wonder what that particular heart shape means. Where one side is larger than the other. One side larger than the other, and white means they actually care for you, love you, and it's a interaction that they hope to have with you. Peaceful interaction, not a marriage proposal or anything like that. It's just a way of communicating that they recognize you and that they know you work from the heart, and that they want a interaction with you that's reasonable and peaceful. Ben, have you ever heard their spoken word for water? No, I have not. The sound that Jen used to make was a for water. Just a funny little. But I can't remember the word for water off the top of my head. I'll have to think about it. But the Asiatic words that they speak, you translate what you hear. If you hear it, if you hear any kind of spoken word that you think is a word, just type it into your phone, do a search, do a word search in Chinese or Japanese. It's the easiest one to get an answer out of. And even if you are not perfect with your spelling, you'll come across something that might be similar. Listen to the sound bite of it, and if it's the same thing that you heard, then you've got a pretty good chance you just found the correct word. Yep, Phil, consistent theme equals consistent behavior. I saw no branches. Most of the top of the bark was off, but also had two hurricanes recently. Yeah, that might do it too. Uh, you, trees can get stripped with something wrapping around them in a hurricane. The wind will just whip them and skin them. Uh, but you know, I'm not sure if it was sit spots around here as well, or if it was humans sitting there, or just the way all the dead vines are. Uh, the banyan tree that take over other trees are also yeah, tricky with their branching. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I'd have to see the evidence, but let me try to get some of these questions read out to you. Okay, so can you explain the dreadful stench that some people report in association with encounters of Sabe and cryptids? Um, there are a couple of reasons for the odor. You can have an aged individual who doesn't bathe because they're sick. You can have an individual that doesn't bathe because when they get older, they don't like to bathe a lot. And occasionally you will get a species type that does not bathe. Because most sabi actually bathe. They sit in cold water, they'll sit in, uh, well, even the gugwe will occasionally bathe. The gugwe like warm water springs, and they'll find a vent spring uh, in a creek to sit in. While, Bigfoot on the average, Sabe, like the Skakam, Guanch, etc., they'll bathe in a pool area in cold water. So if you got the stench, you're either dealing with an aged individual, a sick individual, or a female that you've scared because you're too close to her baby. She will scent because they have scent gland, not unlike a mink or a skunk, and that wafts in the air. Her mate, though, could be sitting 300 feet away. Once she scents, he'll fucking scream at you. He'll growl at you or scream at you to tell you to get the heck out of the area. But you're probably standing 10, 20, well, not even 20, over 10 feet away from his child and wife when they scent like that. And if you're way too close, at 5 feet, your eyes are going to burn because it does make you feel like you're chopping an onion. So you get a direct hit, you're going to have stinging eyes, and they're going to tear up. Okay. Okay, next. Many people report hearing unnerving screams akin to a woman being murdered. Is this, in fact, just female Sabi calling for a mate? If so, this might be good information to put out. And yes, it is good information to put out because that's exactly what's going on. The bloody murder scream that you hear sounds like a woman being murdered. That's the sound that Jen Jen would scream in in the middle of our oak forest on our property. And that's actually how we originally found that she was on our property. Because we heard a woman screaming over in our oak grove, and we thought somebody was getting beaten to death or killed in our oak grove. So we went out to try to find the culprit and rescue the woman. When we got there, uh, we found Jen Jen up the tree about 60, 80 feet. One of our oak trees sitting on a big branch, screaming her head off like a crazy killed woman, woman being beat to death, dying, whatever, screaming for bloody murder. And that's when my dad, hit her with a flashlight and went, oh, wow, we should probably leave her alone. So we took ourselves back across the field and left her alone. But they don't scream every night. She'd go once a week, twice a week up the tree and scream. And then it got, less and less. She did a lot of screaming the beginning of the time that she was on our ranch. And then over the next few years, it was once a month, once a week. It was irregular that she'd go up and scream because she was getting comfortable with the area and she was very choosy. She'd had 4 suitors before the Gugway showed up, and she refused even to, technically marry him, though he forced it. And that's why after, the Gugway had strangled her and broke her larynx, I started screaming in her place. I tried to replicate her scream. And they only do that at night. She never screamed like that during the day. I started replicating it during the day, and that's how I was able to attract Guanche. And when Guanche arrived on the property, I found Doug Gentian and him speaking at the end of one of our mink buildings, and I tried to sneak up on them, and I heard the conversation. And part of the reason why he had come to investigate the difference in the call. The call was not being made in the same tones and not made by the same individual, and he wanted to know what was wrong, what was going on, and why it had changed. And if he hadn't come in and done a looky-loo walk to see what was going on and why the scream changed, she would have never been able to call a mate because her larynx was broken at that point. She couldn't scream that particular tone anymore. So that's how she why she needed my assistance, because I knew she could no longer scream that way. And yeah, if it hadn't been for me doing that, I don't think she would have been saved from that friggin' thing. Okay, let's go back. Phil, the DNA Melba Ketchum results human, female, Middle East, father unknown. Yeah, you'll find a lot of that. You're also going to find that you're going to have more than one species, meaning it's not going to be just one female from the Middle East. It's probably going to be females from several different areas that have similar things. And I actually want to, I want to make Melba Ketchum an offer. I need to find her an email and try to send her an email. Because if my family lore is correct, and I'm actually, what my father said about my DNA test when I was a kid back in the 70s is true, then I'm a percentage of Bigfoot. Maybe I should offer my DNA as a sample for her study. Might help further others understand their ability to mate with us, for one. Really? Oh, that's interesting, Phil. Okay. In India, people have been attacked by what they call monkey man. Oh yeah, New Delhi's got a lot of problems with it. Actually, they have a police force to actually go out and deal with monkey men attacks. You've heard of Djinville, yeah? Okay, cosmic. I wonder if arranged marriages is something learned from them. I wonder that too, because that arranged marriages have always, until medieval ages. Medieval ages, then arranged marriages were between nobility for control. But previously, before that, arranged marriages in most cultures are to create, communal congenial relationships between groups. It's to create a working relationship. Oh, wow. Okay. So, Phil, no alien abductions in those areas either. It's been a recent reveal. Mentioned Buddha, Allah, no effect. I find this fascinating. There are strange things in India for sure. Yes. Well, India has one of the oldest records of the Sabe people, the Ramayana, Hanuman's army. Um, I think there's a significant potential for connection there, especially with some of my Uncle Ong stories and the fact that he claimed that the Nazca lines and the one representation of what looks like a pitchfork down in the Nazca lines area, he Uncle Ong claimed that trident for mountain and the hearts and other little emblems in it represented Hanuman's army. That was their symbol. So that also brings that symbol back into the Thunderbird perspective. Native Americans' mountain symbol is three, like this, and it also represents the same, iconography as the mountain people. We know it's the Sabe. We know it's our forest brothers. The only thing we don't put into it is that uh, in India it's considered Hanuman's army. It's the same symbol with two, we're two relatively different but the same kind of meanings, which I find very fascinating personally. I think there's a potential for a strong connection there with those two symbol, or with that symbol for those two different cultures, our culture and India, in regards to what we call the Thunderbird people and what they call the Monkey people and the Monkey King Hanuman. Lauren, that's so thoughtful and sharing. Yes, yeah, the whole exchanging of stone hearts is very particular to them. Okay, Phil, the missing person 411 example is good reason to be protected by the armor of God, yes? Yes, but you have to understand the uh, the Bigfoot people consider their hair on their body to be the armor of God too, and they claim we, with our little sparse hair, still have the armor of God. So it's our body type is what they're referring to. The shape of our body, the presence of our body is the same as that of the Creator. Yeah, Phil, Melba has been put through the ringer. She might be hard to reach. She's down in Texas doing dogman research at this point. I found her website. I just have to bother to email her. Uh, I think she's got an email up. It would depend on whether or not she'd believe me, for one, and whether or not she'd be interested in a human that potentially might have Sabe DNA, Bigfoot DNA as part of my, genetics. Okay, Beverly, do you think they recognize that part of you could be Sabe and affect how they interact with you? Yeah, I am pretty sure it does have a bearing. Because I do have tapetum lucidum that work. I can't control them, but if I'm out in the middle of the forest in the middle of the night, an incredibly dark night, um, my eyes occasionally will open so I can see better. And I've been very close to them and out in those areas, and I'm sure that they have seen me with my brights on, so to speak. And I think that's part of what makes them a little uh, more amenable to interacting with me than a regular but regular person. But then at the same time, I think that being able to speak with them in their language and write in their kana would probably also go a long way to facilitating communication between groups of them and groups of us. It's Niflheim. The Niflheim are not from here. They're the Redbone people. They're the ones that fell from the other planet. At least that's what Uncle Long's stories and what my grandmother's native stories suggested. Cosmic. They're First Nations. Yep, they're the original First Nation people. In fact, my grandmother referred to them as the grandparents of humanity. They're the elders of our people that we forgot about. Okay, Cosmic was going to ask you about Hanuman, but you just answered. Sorry, I keep going past you, don't I, Cosmic? You think loudly, I guess. Sabi-like beings are almost everywhere. Yes, Phil, you're correct. However, alien abductions is not so much. Also true. The aliens that come to our planet or live here, they also have, their set areas that they're in. There are a few alien species that are here that live here habitually. I don't know a lot about them. Some of them are underwater ocean creatures, and some of them live in mountains. But they're always typically underground or underwater bases, that sort of thing. The ones that come here and leave, they're kind of either touristy, looking at the funny humans and the bizarre planet, or they're coming here to resupply. They're collecting what they need as goods, whatever, and leaving. And then there are a few that are evidently not so good, and they just come to pick up food sources, us. Okay, Ayastala, maybe slightly off topic, but do you know anything of the turning your clothes inside out when getting pixie-led or lost in the forest? Yeah, I've heard that. That was an old story from Middle Era and before. If you got lost in the woods, turn your clothes inside out, and you'll be able to get home because they aren't dissuading you from remembering your way home. It might be a representation or talking about infrasound, being hit by infrasound and you're losing your way. Might have been a precautionary thing. You sit down, you take your clothes off, you turn them inside out, gives your mind time to catch back up from the infrasound attack, and then you go on, if it's associated with Sabe. Otherwise, it might just be old mythology. But then, I don't think the mythologies were wrong. I think they're far more accurate than we realize. Well, you have to understand, Phil, some of these people understand the Creator better than we do. Paul Bunyan, Dogman, and Blue is very interesting. Well, he was not a dogman per se, he was a Wachugi. Wachugi had the upper legs and body of a human, but had dog feet, and had a very human-looking face. Uh, so he's not like a cynocephali or anything, or a dogman, which dogmen look like big freaking black shepherds that stand on their hind legs. So the body form is slightly different. But somewhere online there's floating around a picture of Paul Bunyan. It's one of the pictures my family donated that's been put up online but isn't given an explanation. The next time I see it floating around on YouTube, I'll capture a screenshot of it. You want my left hand or you want my right hand? And then there's my right one. I know it doesn't mean money. Okay, yeah, the M's on the palms aren't typo. Yeah. Uh, okay. Yeah, I've heard about the Zero. I have heard about the Bluff Creek Massacre story. Didn't that happen back in the 70s? Uh, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But I wouldn't say it was potentially Bigfoot. It could have been mountain boogers or Gugway, more red-bone people. It's the kind of behavior that my grandmother talked about. You know, if you push those people too far, they'll just, rip you apart. And my father's family's interaction up in the Okanagan with the mountain boogers and what might have been Janoskwa suggest that they are very violent and they're very cunning. I put up 3 or 4 little shorts about that story. Uh, my my father and his parents, when they were trapping up in the Okanagan back in, well, let's see, 1919 to about 1923, 24. Um, by the end of it, they had pushed their trap line way too far into the wrong territory, controlled by, you know, red-bone people, and they came in conflict with them. And when they came in conflict with them, they set a trap. My grandmother got caught in it. She got caught in a what they call a jaunty trap, meaning it shot a spike up through her crotch, broke her pelvic bone, and then you know those mountain boogers, Gugway and Janoskwa, came to where their cabin was. While she was trying to heal, she lived through it. It took her 5 months before she could stand. Uh, they started being attacked, and the house was being surrounded. The little cabin was being surrounded, and they were forced to live off of their food stores from their larder. They couldn't go out to hunt. They couldn't trap. They couldn't do anything, and they had to protect their animals. So they actually ended up burning the animal building over first, because they didn't want to lose their chance to be able to get out of there. And then they created a tunnel between, or what would become a tunnel, between their original cabin and the animal shelter. And they burned all that over, and then they finally ended up having to burn their cabin over in order to live through the onslaught of attacks that were, intermittent but regular. Which race varieties are redbone and why they are called redbone? Okay, so I know that the Gugway are considered redbone, the fish people, sun-faced people, those species of what you think are Bigfoot, eat a lot of crayfish. They end up with, and the Tegu and Tengu are also, and the Gamahugi of Japan are also all considered redbone people. They eat a lot of crayfish and high keratin stuff that changes their overall skin tone to, coral colored to red like a sunburnt person, or really sunburnt. They'll be red faced, red skinned, or they'll be coral skinned, like a sunburnt person. And it's a form of poisoning that's pervasive throughout the body because of the high keratin level. And their bones also will look red, like if they break a bone, if the bone is chipped, you'll find the bone section is not cream colored or more creamier colored like ours or cows' bones are. The fiber material of the bone is actually tainted by the keratin, and it's pinkish to kind of coralish in color, which is a good indication of what they are. That's why they're called redbone people. The fish people, the Native Americans call the fish people, are the Lovelock giants. They were considered fish people, and they also have the keratin poisoning. But they had, if there are any still alive, have uh, little teeth that look like shark's teeth that grow in rows just like a shark's does. So the Lovelock giants were what we know as fish people and within the native culture, and they have a similar dietary issue. Though it was suggested that they collected their crayfish from underground in underground streams. Uh, and my grandmother claimed that some of those crayfish underground are clear or white in color. And now there have been some, what I think in Florida in some of the cave systems, they found freshwater crayfish that are in underground caves that are clear. So that's another of my grandmother's stories that was accurate. Okay, cosmic wild man, which race? Oh, I just answered that. Okay. Phil, I was observed a large group of Sabe whale deer hunting, at least a dozen individuals. I couldn't see their faces in the branches of the trees. Is there a native way to make them bugger off? No, dear. There isn't really a way you can get them to bugger off, but if you use their or clear your throat, sometimes you'll get a response. What they're actually doing is following you because you're in their land. You're invading into their territory, and you haven't made an offer to give them part of their own deer. And if they consider them a sacred animal, and are followers of the Hegopla, then you're going to need to make a trade for the deer that you shoot, even though you think it's on federal or private land or public land. No, I can't do it on public land. They still see the area as their home turf. Native Americans, we used to, when we get followed like that, we send one individual to go trade. Means one went back to sit and talk with the Sabe. How much do you want for hunting on your land? Do we need to leave a leg quarter, or do we need to leave half a deer? But that practice has fallen out, and the cough is the way you can get them to sit down and maybe stop pursuing you. Excuse me. The air quality in this valley is really bad. It's stagnant recently. And being in it all day makes my allergies go stupid again. So, the cough or clearing your throat is an indicator that you want to talk or you want them to stop. If they don't respond to it and they don't cease, when you cough or clear your throat at them, then you're not dealing with Sabe. You're dealing with a red bone person. At which point, it's better to find a different hunting area. The coughing, a cough, good solid cough, clearing your throat, it should stop them from moving forward. But being able to negotiate a trade, I mean, you can tell them in English if you're willing to give anything up. Otherwise, you'd have to, take your risks. Or just tell them, hey, I'm here with a tag. I had a friend who had a couple of his deer stolen a few years ago, about 20 years ago now. And he asked me what to do about it because he was hunting on his own private land. And 2 years in a row, he'd bow hunt, kill his deer, and then Sabe pick it up and walk off with it. So he asked me, "Hey cousin, what do I do about this?" And I said, "Well, take him a 6 pack of beer, or leave him part of the deer. Give him something in exchange. They do like beer, and they will take trade of part of the catch as payment for you hunting on their land, because that's how they view it. We view it as our land, and we're going to go in and do as we please, and they view it as their land and their goods. So there's part of the conflict issues that are potentially, you know, causing a rift between our two cultures because we don't understand their behavior, they don't understand our behavior. Excuse me. Okay, Cosmic, got it almost. Shape in your palm. Oh wow, Ben, I didn't know that. Cosmic. I had a feeling Gugway and Judasqua would be in the red bone category. Yeah. The funny thing is, though, whereas Judasqua can be reasoned with, as they can, my mother did her turnout with 5 Judasqua. She had the harder turnout than both my grandmother and myself. She had to live with a family group of Judasqua because that was the requirements of her Maya grandmother's request. You had to live with the Judasqua, so you'd learn the Comazots language, the Bat people's language. Because the Judasqua, Ishka, can speak to the Comazots people. So she said there are ways of, they do speak, they do have language, and there are, once you learn their behaviors and you understand what you can and cannot do, and they do use tools, and they do weave shoes, you have a chance of reasoning with them, but you have to understand their social mannerisms. You can't look them in the face. You always have to divert your eyes. And that's part of, when you have Indians telling you in certain areas, oh no, I always divert my eyes. Well, then they're dealing with Ishka. They're not dealing with Bigfoot. You can look a Bigfoot in the face. They don't care. But you can't do that with an Ishka. They consider that disrespectful, and that you're going against them by looking at their because they consider themselves the father of the Guanche people. So they demand a certain level of respect, is how my mother put it. And my adopted Guanche father said the same thing. No, you can't look at Booger people in the face, and you can't look at the Judasqua in the face because they both are older species, and we owe them our respect. You don't look them in the face. 0, do you think there are others like your Uncle Ong out there and living among us? Oh yeah, I'm 100% sure of that. And, some of them might even be walking around in your own flippin' neighborhood and you don't know it. But you'd have to be very attentive as to their look. I know that the Ozarks and some of the hills back east have lots of wild men in them. And when they're out living naturally, not, blending with us, they look like a hairy primate from, like, Cage Down. though they're upright walker. And from the rib cage up, they look like a human, though they have slightly longer arms, and they are not massively huge. They're our size. They average, 5'10" to 6.5 feet tall on average. Some will get up to 7 feet, but that's irregular. They're relatively human size. They're just tall people that have a primate lower half, or primate looking lower half. And in fact, I'm not too sure that, I think that's what my bloodline comes from, because the the other characteristic of the wild men is they end up with 3 sets of teeth throughout their lives, and their last set is all molars, and they can live an incredibly long time. A lot of the natives in my family lived into their early hundreds pretty regularly until recently. Last 3 generations or so, we don't have as long a lifespan. And there were some stories of some of our family members living into their 130s, 150s, uh, you know, previous to 5 generations ago. So, or previous to 4 generations ago, excuse me, not 5. So there's a good possibility that, and I did have a grandfather on my mother's father's native side that had 3 sets of teeth, 2 permanent, 1 set of baby teeth, and his third set of teeth didn't come in until he was 70 years old, and they were all molars, and he lived to be 105, if I remember correctly. And he also had excellent vision. He could see you almost 10 miles away across a ridgeline, turn around and say, hey, so-and-so's coming. I can see him. Which is, binoculars. You need really good sights to see 10 miles away. Most people, even with, good oculars, only see 2 miles. So he had to have had, unless the stories about him were absolutely wrong, he had to have had excellent eyesight. Way better than any normal person. Yeah, my assumption, Phil, is that, yeah, red bone people are the ones that are more likely to blame for, any kind of 411. If it's a cryptid that's involved, it's that kind of cryptid. Because there are also other flying cryptids. There are the Comasotes people. There's the Thunderbird, and there are 2 types of Thunderbird. There's the feathered Thunderbird, Stormbringer, and then there is also what you'd consider pectodactyl or tetradactyl or pterosaur, because those are the 2 descriptions from my native grandmother's lore. You're either dealing with a really big eagle with orange feet and an orange beak that looks like a golden eagle and has about a 12-foot wingspan, and there is one in this area. I just haven't been able to get freaking film of him yet. I've only seen him once, and he's not full grown. He's still pretty young. He's only got about an 8-foot or 10-foot wingspan. So hopefully this next summer or spring I'll be able to get into where he's at, and hopefully I can film him or her. I don't know if it's male or female. And then there's the pterosaurs. In my grandmother's stories about those thunderbird birds, she described 2 types. One with a tail that had a diamond-shaped wedge at the end, and the other version had no tail. And she said that the ones with the tail with the diamond-shaped piece at the end had uh, hair-like feathers that were cinnamony red in color, and they had leathery bat-like wings and had the 3 little fingers on the top of their wings, not unlike a bat. That's her physical description from the lore. So if it's some sort of pterosaur, then there isn't a good bone record of the feathers or the potential little feather puff at the end of the tail. Because she claimed that little diamond wedge wasn't a piece of flesh or anything, it was little feathers. The only feathers that particular thing truly produced was just on the end of its tail. Yeah, I Stolly, those traps are terrifying. Phil Melba Ketchum contact group, female Sabe said we can go to where Jesus is. Oh, okay. Well, that sucks. Hey, Lauren, hi. If there was one word or sound to announce friend to the Sabe, what would it be? I'm sure you have covered this. Oh, yeah. The most common word I use is nidoba, for friend. And it's Abenaki because Abenaki seems to be one of the languages almost every one of these groups has the ability to speak or at least understand. So, Nidoba means friend in Abenaki. And I use that one pretty regularly along with the cough to indicate, hey, I'm not going to hurt you. The other is cough also means I'm not going to attack. It, you know, stop and desist. I'm not going to attack. When you were talking, I saw that when you were talking about that possible vampire with the transparent skin and extra joints, I couldn't but think of a spider or spiders also ate blood. I don't know, probably no connection. Yeah, I don't know, but that is an interesting observation I saw, like, because that is a potential. The one sloth looking creature that I saw, let's see, that was like 2009 up in Washington. Um, when I saw it crawling down the hillside, though it had dog feet, kinda, she was scooting down on her rump, but her limbs were very, very long and thin, both her legs and her arms, and she had very long, like bear-like but bigger claws on her toes and her hands, and she only had 3 fingers. I got to see her from maybe 40 feet away. Her face had that messed up like anglerfish teeth, and her nose looked like an upturned monkey nose. You know, the little kind of skeletal-looking nose, and she had what looked like a presentment of snout. But the thing that got me was, you know how tarantulas have a very kind of spiky look to their body hair. Her body hair looked very much like that when she was coming down the hillside, and that was part of the reason I'm standing there looking at her, going, okay, so my father said this about these things, and my mother said, or grandmother said something different about them, but that thing looks a lot like a spider. Now I understand why my grandmother called them spider sloth, uh, because those are the two descriptive words that most closely resemble not only what the hair structure looks like, but also the body structure and the movement resembled. So I'm assuming that's why they were named as such. Yes, Cosmic, when you said extra shark's teeth, did you mean double rows? Yeah, the skull, the Lovelock Cave skull that I got to examine when I was about 8 or 9 years old, very definitely had 3 rows of teeth presented in the upper part of the jaw, and same in the mandible. It had 3 rows, so a full set that was in, and then the two sets of babier, smaller teeth. The overall teeth in the front were about 3/4 of an inch in length, about the same in width, and the 2 smaller rows behind, maybe 1/4 and an eighth of an inch in length. So they were still, you know, as the teeth in front would fall out, they were still growing in the new set. Um, yeah, the jaw structure, though it had a very human mandible, and skull structure, the tooth structure was very much like that of a shark, just not as many rows growing. And you could see the little purling where the fourths were coming in, the fourth line of them were coming in, but they hadn't developed yet in the skull. Yeah, I've been thinking about it. I do need some water. But I've got some juice right there. Okay, Phil, I have the gut piles. They don't take a deer from me a month back. Oh, they did take a deer from you. Okay. Yeah, I've run across those, and I'm never sure if it was a hunter, depending on some of the instances because of the location, or if it was, a Sabe leaving the guts behind. Some of the piles I can distinguish as, because you can very clearly tell that, they just pulled the entrails out by hand, and they're not dumped out in order. They're kind of, strewn. So, that's a little difference. That's a good suggestion, Phil, for the cure for my ailments. Okay, this remedy works. Yep, yep. Yeah, ginger tea is another good one. Phil, the land I hunt is private. I've had permission on this land for 4 years. I heard gifting them is dangerous. No, gifting is, in native culture, uh, you don't take anything. Uh, you have to give something in return for what you need. So, gifting is actually the proper practice for their culture. You can think of it this way. Would you like somebody walking in and taking something out of your refrigerator and then leaving and giving you nothing in return? Because that's their perspective. You're walking into their kitchen, you're taking food from them, and you're not leaving anything for them. You're being rude, you're being a thief, and bad manners. So it was a native custom. You know, whenever we knew we were in Sabi territory and we knew that we were hunting their lands, we always left a portion of the kill, and that would usually suffice. Otherwise, we'd have to negotiate, and they'd tell us how much they wanted. But you don't have that luxury. You don't have that luxury because cultures or knowing the difference. Are you dealing with a forest brother or are you dealing with a red-boned individual? So there's a huge lore, information, communication gap there, and mythology about them being animals, and you can't do, gifting because you're habituating an animal. No, you're not habituating an animal. You're literally trading with a human being that doesn't look like you, a primitive person. And that's how natives always saw them. They're our ancestors. They taught us trade. They taught us to hunt. They taught us to tan and pull hides. They taught us to make tools. They taught us to use fire. They taught us everything we need. They taught us how to communicate with calls. That all indigenous people understand that. It's just modern people that don't, because there's been a disconnect of information, a loss of information. Hai Tai. Ooh. Are you positive Hai Tai and not Mai Mai? Look those two words up, Lauren. You might be able to translate those. I know that Mai Mai is commonly used, and that might be a variation of Mai Mai, which is by cell. But I'd have to look them up. I haven't heard those before. FG, do you like Travis Scott? I don't know who Travis Scott is. I'm sorry. I've been really busy in my life. Phil, again, it depends on which. If you're dealing with a red bone, you can get away with looking at a sun-faced person in the face. I've done it to two different species and haven't gotten anything more than a and you can't do it with the Ishka, Janauska. Uh, they'll see it as a disrespect and they will chuck you off a hillside. Almost had that happen to me. Um, I don't know about the other red bone people, but there was some stories about some of the more giant people, like the fish people. You would incite them if you looked at them because they thought you were being disrespectful, but it's more a power play with those bigger creatures. Uh, it's more of you're challenging them, and not a good circumstance to be in. And the booger people too. They don't like being looked at. It's considered rude. Booger people consider that rude. You're being rude. You're being nosy. Well, cosmic. I've always heard to never whoop at them, never puff your chest, or show your teeth to them. It depends on the species. So if you want a friendly face for a dog man, where he'll go, "What the heck?" and kind of smile at you, their friendly face is like a baboon's friendly face, and it doesn't look friendly. So a baboon's friendly face, they put their brow down, and they look very cross with you. And how they smile is they bare their teeth at you. That's a friendly face. You can do that to a dog man, and he'll go, "Huh? Wow!" Because it's the same face an Ishka makes at you. It's a friendly face. I call for a whoop. I use a whoop for calling help, just like they do, or to back off. And I've had them respond to me in the correct way because I use the associative knocks to tell them what I'm calling for help for. Um, so that's just not understanding the correct call signals. And the whole popping your chest at them. They'll pop their chest at you, very much like a gorilla, if you are trying to coax a child away from them. Or a child has gotten too interested in you, they will pop their chest to bring the kid back and to warn you to bugger off. And the one time I was pretty severely surrounded in, I think it was 2009, I had like 10 individuals around me. One of them popped his chest at me. So I looked at him and I told him, go away. And I coughed to keep him from advancing on me. And I sat down and let them do their thing. One was throwing, pieces of pine tree at me. A couple of them were shaking bushes, and the rest of them were sneaking up on the ground towards me. So I just sat in place, and every time they were get aggressive, I'd cough, clear my throat. Because I'm female, I can get away with that. You're messing with mom, go away. If you are female and you sit down and you do that behavior, it's like the matriarch telling them, no, I'm not going to be bothered by you. I don't know if a male can get away with that. They probably can. But I know a female can get away with that when they're surrounded because I've done it. And it was something I was told about by my grandmother. She understood coughing meant to break the contact. They're going to stop advancing on you. They're going to stop attacking. But it's only specific cryptids that you can do that with. You can do that with the Oma, the Guanch, the Yeren, and the Skookum. But that behavior won't work with, you know, Dugway or any of the other red bone people. They'll not respond to the cough for one, and they will continue advancing. They don't care. Okay, so let's see. Uh, Let me see if I can read another question from my email, and then I'll answer some more of your questions. Okay, so many people report suddenly becoming overwhelmed by an intense sense of fear, but the impression I get is that it never manifests into that outcome. That's actually something my grandmother spoke of too, in a way. Um, my grandmother kind of described what you might consider a presence attack, and your own personal fear adds to that. So once you realize something's advancing on you and it's like 4 times your size, uh, your body becomes adrenalated unless you can control it. So the interaction that happens is actually a pheromone level interaction. Your body is responding to the scent that you are not mentally aware of, but that your nose is picking up. And this is also with, like mink. You can actually pick up a wild mink, and it won't bite you until you have adrenaline in your system. As soon as you have adrenaline and any inclination of fear, and the adrenaline scent gets on your skin, a mink will bite you, and he will bite you through the bone and won't let go. If you can keep your adrenaline from hitting, that pheromone response from the mink will not happen. I think that's part of what's going on with some people. The fear response that you have, the adrenaline that comes to your skin, incites the red bone person or the Sabe in the area and makes them want to attack you, because there is that possibility if you're putting it into the perspective of animal behavior and reactionary behavior of defense or offense, so to speak. There is still some of that potential there. Don't know. I'd have to do more experiments with it. But I do know I control my fear when I'm around them. I don't let myself become adrenalated, and I've never had a major issue. I've never had any instance, even with the dog man, that I felt like I was going to have a bad response. I mean, he could have ripped the walls apart. He could have taken the door off. There was nothing really to keep him out of a yurt with flimsy walls and a door that you could just pull off the wall, literally. But he didn't do it. I always thought it was just because didn't uh, I didn't respond to his fear tactic. He was trying to scare me. He was trying to get an adrenaline response out of me, and I didn't do it. Instead, I would go outside and say, "Hi, what are you doing here? Why are you being a butthole?" I didn't let it get to me. But that's something a lot of people aren't going to be able to do because they haven't been around them a lot, and you may not have that kind of control over your body. You actually have to keep yourself at a level and a non-reactionary and non-frightened. The other thing is bees will sting you if you become adrenalated. It's not just because you run away, it's because you smell like adrenaline. That's why they come in mass and sting you. It's a pheromone response. Really, Phil? You saw an eagle that was very large, as you described. Yeah, they look like a great big golden eagle, except they have orange feet and an orange beak. And when they get older, their beak will start to blacken, and it's just the tip, according to my grandmother, that remains orange or will turn yellow in later years. So they don't have like a bald eagle coloration to their feet, which are yellow, and they don't have golden eagle coloration, which is brown. They've got that orange, and their talons are black. Yeah, Phil, you heard that the spider walkers are incredibly fast. They can be, as can any of these creatures. They can all be so dang fast, they're just a blur. So, if they really wanted to clobber us, we couldn't do a dang thing about it. And don't even think for a second that we could. If you can't see it, can't even shoot it, for instance. Okay, Jared. Any cryptids that can turn humans into other cryptids? I don't know about that one. It's a very interesting question, though, because there are some natives that would go to the little people uh, to be trained as medicine people. So there's a possibility through that sort of thing. But other than that, I wouldn't know. Okay. Uh, I no, the only thing I've ever seen that way, Phil. A few experiencers say that Sabe ate their poo, even their under their outhouse. You're probably dealing with a red bone or a gugway, because they will poo where they eat, where they collect and forage their food. Um, but Bigfoot Sabe don't do that sort of behavior. Okay, Cosmic, why is tobacco a common gift to them? Do the Sasquatch make tobacco bundles? And why does it ward off bad spirits? Well, tobacco gets rid of the bad star people. That's one. And native culture very well knows that tobacco puts evil spirits at bay. And gifting tobacco means that you're on the same side against evil. And you're giving the Sabe a tool that they can use to keep evil out of their area. They don't seem to care. You can sniff, scratch, fart, piss, and shit in their area, and they don't give a crap. Cosmic, that's your answer for that one. Okay. Unwanted. Unwanted contact. Eye contact. Reminds me of inner city gang banger criminal behaviors. You looking at me? Yeah, it's somewhat like that. Okay. I saw shortly before and I found your videos. I had a dream I was being chased by somebody in a giant baboon mask. Yikes. That would be a horrible dream, my Stolly. Brad, hello from Saudi Arabia. My sister is turning 19 today. Yeah. Okay. Hillier. Ha. Very cute. Hollis, I feel humans have been here for eons. Yeah, all native lore around the world suggests that we've been here just as long as the planet has, and that we're not a new thing on the planet. We're just the same old dirt. I mean, most of our planet, of our surface, is made up of, you know, leftover skin from all kinds of critters, and a lot of it's us. Oh, Ben, teenage Sabe are about what height? Well, you would consider a teenage Sabe because they're adults at 8, and they're 8 foot tall, or roughly 8 to 8.5 foot tall, unless they grow quicker than they're 9 foot at age 8. So an individual that would be a teenager is roughly our size, 5 to 6 feet, 4 to 5 years of age. Um, teenage teenage Sabi are actually usually put in the position of babysitting or out learning tasks. So they have a combination of behaviors. They'll either want to interact with you like an adult and want to try to trade with you. So the mannerisms will be very similar to an adult hunter. Or if you're dealing with a female, they'll want you to probably go away because you're too close to the kids. And they're usually babysitting younger, brothers or sisters. So typically you can do trading what I can spare, and they have a tendency to move the little ones away from you, so you don't have to worry too much about them trying to get violent or angry with you. They typically will just move the younger ones away and get out of your way. Phil, it takes real focus to remain calm when Sabe are near. Yeah, no kidding. It can be quite a startling experience in some cases. Okay. Mm, unless you're referring to vampires, Jared, any cryptids that can turn humans into other cryptids. Uh, I don't know of any such lore other than the one tribe that would go talk to the little people that had white hair and tan skin, like to be outside during the day. They would send their prospective medicine people to be trained by them, and then vampires. There are cryptids that supposedly, like vampires and composites, that can do things very much like vampires. They can drain you of blood. They can change shape. They can change their body shape. They can turn into kind of a mist, supposedly. But I haven't seen it, so it's stories to me. So, yeah, no problem. You're welcome. Okay, now, yes, Cosmic, you're very correct. They like to eat mussels. One of the reasons they visit the beaches often. They also go after freshwater mussels, uh, and freshwater clams. So those are clams and mussels are, and I've also seen them take oysters. Uh, so those are all things that they use as food source. Also, that are small items that people don't notice. But you're correct; those are a food item for them. Okay, Ben, sounds like they will generally behave instead of acting foolish. Yes, typically. I mean, unless you get aggressive or try to steal one of the young ones, then you might have a problem. They'll probably throw something at you, or they might even try to come at you. If you kill one of the young ones, you're probably screwed. Uh, Depends on, though, how the overall group acts. Well, Phil, freshwater clams. Everyone thinks the otters eat those. I know Sabe do. Actually, otters do eat them, but the difference with the collection method is what's key. An otter will bite the shell and break it to get the, or they'll crack it. They'll smack it with a rock and open it. When Sabe are eating freshwater clams, they just pry them open with their two thumbnails and eat the clam out of the shell. And you'll see the twist in the knuckle back on that shell, where the left hand, right hand placement, and occasionally you'll find the little inner chip on the inside of the mouth of the shell, where they may have snapped off some of the material of the shell opening it, especially if it's a smaller clam. And those are usually fed to babies, little ones. That's one of their easy foods for the little ones to collect and be able to manage by themselves, along with the freshwater mussels. My gosh, excuse me. Yeah, I started out this show not having a stuffy nose or a cough, but dang. Phil, yep, all the shells in the area I hunt, no damage, the shell just missing the contents. Yeah, it means they're very delicate with their movements. You might have ones in your area that have more limber hands. I know that the Guant have a tendency to damage the shells a little bit, and so do the Skaakum. But if you've got something in your area that's got more nimble fingers, they're not going to have as much of a chance of damaging a shell like that. Okay. Let me go down to the next. Just trying to shuffle through to find a couple more of these questions. Okay. Cosmic. Wonder if it was Junior Sasquatch. Yeah, it could have been. Cosmic, I think there was a good session and okay to wrap up. We can continue. You have a good one. Take care, Cosmic. Phyllis Kid was helping me build my woodshed, putting bent spikes. Phil, I was passing metal roofing. The spiral spikes were of no use. Interesting. They do make spirals, though, some of them. Okay. If you guys have any more questions, I'd pop off with them now. Because I think I'm going to head out. I think I've covered the few questions that were in the email. Uh, the whole idea of dialogue, actually. Uh, so when I'm referring to like Jen Jen and Guanch and the things that they told me, they can carry a conversation with you. Sabe can have a regular conversation just like you or I can. That's how she was able to tell me her lore, how she was able to share her stories, and it's a very cognitive reasoning pattern that they have. They're not stupid. They can hold a conversation. They know what things are. They may have broken language at times, broken English, so to speak, but they can sit down and have a conversation with you. In fact, I'll share one more story before I head out. So when I was a child, and my mother and I were down in the Redwoods camping, we were camping in a bowl area next to a river that had a massive, like 30-foot, you know, remnants of an ancient tree trunk that had been, you know, cut down and rotted. And in that area, I accidentally made a grouse call. Well, I was intentionally making the grouse call, but I accidentally called a, Guanch Bigfoot into the area. The guy that looks like a gorilla, like Patty. And it was at a campground, and the neighboring people right next to our camp, uh, the old guy was near where I was when I made the grouse call, and at the edge of the clearing, uh, here comes this launch person who just steps out as soon as I made the call. And the old guy who was camping next to us, we were, both down by the edge of the field and near the river, he asked me where I learned to make that call. I said, well, I was taught it by my dad. And he said, funny. Uh, and then he looks over. He says, do you know what that is? Pointing at the Bigfoot. I said, yeah, that's a guanch. And he asked me, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, because we have some on our ranch. And he said, well, that one's my friend. He's been friends with our family since my grandfather's time. And I met him when I was a boy. So there's, the interaction. He actually, his grandfather had been a logger in the middle 1860s, 1870s, and had, been part of the people that cut down old growth, and had actually befriended uh, a cryptid man, a Sabe, a freaking, Guanch man. So uh, his family would come every year. The old man's family would come every year. They camped in the same spot, and they'd visit their Bigfoot family that had been known to them for 3 generations. And he was bringing the third generation of his family, his grandson, to meet the grandfather Sabe's, and I just happened to make the same call that they used to interact and let each other know, hey, we're here for a meeting. So later that night, the campsite next to us, and this was a camping area where there were divisional hedges, so your campsites were relatively, private and not noticeable from other people except for, little doorways in the hedges. And there was nobody camped directly across from where either of us were, and we were right next to the bathroom, and then he was the next site over. So in the middle of the night, I get woke up by the conversation going on between the old man and the Sabi about, getting the kids together the following night to meet. And I stood at the hedge line looking through the little hedge door because I got out of bed, excused myself from our camping back, and I said, hey, Mom, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Instead, I went over to listen to the conversation because I was being a nosy 8-year-old. And, of course, the Guanch Sabi man noticed me, and Asked the old man, hey, about the company we got here? And the old man says, yeah, I spoke with her earlier. She's got a friend at her ranch, same kind of, you know, situation that we have. So they have the same kind of, interactive abilities. And the same kind of communication skills that we have. Not only do they hold a reasonable conversation, they can maintain, generational relationships with us if they so choose to. And of how his grandfather originally met uh, the Sabe man's grandfather was he had fallen a tree, and the tree was not good. It was rotted out in the middle, so they left it. The loggers left it behind. And he'd go up on that log on the ridgeline, and he'd sit and eat his lunch. And one day, a teenage-ish, probably 5 or 6 year old Bigfoot walked out of the forest and sat on the other end of the log and just watched him eat his lunch. So the next day, the guy brought 2 sandwiches and set one at the end where the Sabe sat, and he sat in the middle, like he always did, of the log and ate his lunch. And sure enough, the Sabe came down, and the Bigfoot came down and sat at the end of the log and ate the sandwich. And then he just placed the sandwich closer and closer and closer. After about a week or two, they were sitting side by side having conversations with each other because they'd made friends with each other. And that relationship had lasted for 3 generations in the man's family. So there are stories like that out there too that people aren't aware of, don't know even exist or have happened. Okay. Cosmic, did they tell you when your Flash of Beauty interview will air? I haven't gotten word yet on that. They were talking about maybe doing a couple more interviews with me. And I know they're really busy. I know they're working on some other projects. So I'm gonna have to contact them this weekend and yeah, ask when it might be out. I don't know how long their production time is. If it's a couple weeks, if it's a couple months. So I'll have to ask. And as soon as I know, I'll let you know. Phil, I had experiences with the Sabe at age 10. He took me for a flight where I was seeing through the eyes of an eagle. That's an interesting thing there. No, I have not experienced that. Everything I've done has been at the ground level, and it's always been just the interactions with either the individuals that lived on a ranch or the individuals that my grandmother and mother would take me to go be introduced to and learn about. My field trips out into the woods or our camping trips. We're going to go visit Dogmen today. You're going to learn about that. We're going to go visit Skookum today. You're going to learn about that. We're going to go here. This is dangerous cryptid. You got to be careful of this type of dogman. And stay in the vehicle. We're eating our lunch, but we're not leaving the freaking vehicle because he's too dangerous. So that was the how I learned about most of this stuff. And then, as I got older and my education was more completed, I started going and exploring. When somebody would say, hey, I've seen this sort of thing in this kind of an area. Could you tell me what it is? Are you willing to go look at it? Or, I've had this experience and this is where I had the experience. Can you go take a look at it? Or I would get people who would be generational people, like where the bear people are, where Bear Woman and her family is. I was actually introduced to a old pioneer landowner in this area just before he donated the land to be turned into a preserve, part of the marsh preserve area. And he wanted to talk to somebody about the bear people on the property because he knew what kind of buildings were going to be put in. And he explained, these people are going to end up with this thing in their backyard and they aren't going to know it. Are they going to be dangerous to them? Because they haven't been dangerous to our family. We've lived here for 3 generations, and we've always had good interactions and trade with them, and they've never bothered us. He wanted to know if advancement of our society into their area was going to cause a problem. I said, I doubt it. They don't seem to get too bothered or violent with us. It's just mostly us screwing up that makes them turn violent, unless you're dealing with something that's more dangerous. And he filled me in on his family's experiences with the bear people and told me what their writing was like and what kind of markers they used. And he walked me through the territory and showed me where the bed system was up in the tree, which has been in the same place for flip 150 years now. You know, the trees are still growing, the bed system doesn't change unless it falls out of the tree or gets blown over. So, you know, that kind of thing also occurs and nobody's aware of it. You know, it's not something you could put on a land sale deal. One, oh, you're talking about mythic creatures, and two, the people that are aware of them and know they're friendly and know they're not going to hurt anything don't want them harmed, so they're not going to tell you anyway. Huh. Phil, yeah, you might be experiencing what native hunters call seeing through the eyes of your target animal. Uh, or you have somehow subconsciously learned to communicate through a bird, meaning that you're astrally projecting and you're interacting with the bird to see through their eyes. And that's something that Deer Society people learn to do, and that's something that Native American hunters learn to do. You learn to find your game by looking through their eyes and seeing where they're at. I've done that. You know, you think about the animal and you sleep on it, and your dream will tell you where they're at. And by the morning when you wake up, you'll know exactly where to go because you've already been there, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, Phil. I've been able to precisely locate game animals. Yep, that's a learned ability. That's something Native Americans practice. That's something the Sabe practice to do. And it's part of the society cultures within indigenous culture, both Sabe and Native. And that is a good potential. And that sort of concept can be a gift from another person. Well, Cosmic, if all the old stories are correct, then the deer societies probably originally came from, you know, the Bigfoot people, and we've adopted similar concepts. I know the bear societies in the north are connected that way, and the people that are in the bear society do say, yeah, it's the original people that taught us this particular way, and that's why we preserve it to this day because our original people, the first people, taught it to us, and we're just here learning from them. So, hey, that's a good one. You've got good bloodline there, Welsh, Norwegian, Phil. You got a lot of Raven mythology, Eagle mythology. You know, the single eye. You know, working through your as the natives see it as your holy eye. When you're working through your third eye, you're psychically seeing and interacting with the world. And that's something we're taught to use is our third eye. It's how we see into the world of certain cryptids, like the Wendigo. To avoid a Wendigo, you can't look at it more than once. It's one of the known things. If you look at a Wendigo through the third eye more than once, it will hunt you. but you can find it and know to avoid the area. Yeah, some people are like that. Very intuitive, Phil. Knowing if a woman's pregnant, that's part of the intuitiveness of our auras and our psyche and our third eye abilities. And these are all things that everybody have. They just have to practice them in some cases or pay attention to them in others. Oh, cosmic. What are the deeper meanings of the pine cone and what would be the reason they'd gift a pine cone? Well, pine cones are, depends on which cultural aspect you want to look at. Well, with Sabe, pine cones are something they use to clean their teeth with. Basically, they chew on them to break up all the tartar and stuff on their teeth and get stuff out between their teeth. So they're basically their form of toothpaste. And then you've got the old Assyro-Babylonian concept of pine cone. Potentially, that's a relevance to, or potentially not a relevance, but potentially a suggestion of the pituitary gland and the concept of the third eye. Because when you get into Egyptian mythology, you get into Assyrian Babylonian mythology, they have a lot of similarities between the idea of, uh, your third eye is connected to how you speak, and how you speak is connected to your ability to see the other world. It's this kind of little triangle of philosophy in those ancient cultures. But uh, Native Americans understand that eating human brain material in any form, including the pituitary gland, not only leads to disease, but it can also lead to possession. And the Sabe understand that too. The Bigfoot, why they don't eat the human brain or any brain material. They'll take it for tanning a hide, but they don't eat the pituitary gland because they understand it leads to possession and kuru, a really bad illness that make you laugh intensely for no reason, and you'll get to a point where your jaw will seize and you'll start salivating and slobbering, and then your nerve system breaks down and you eventually die from the disease in a very horrific way. You basically fall apart because of the kuru in your body. Poetisms. It's been very interesting and enlightening watching your channel over these last months. Thank you for sharing your experience and knowledge. Yeah, you're welcome. And I'm glad that the information I'm sharing is helping fill in some puzzle pieces. And I'm glad that some people have come forward with more questions so that I have the ability to bring more knowledge forward and answer it in a cohesive way. Because me just talking about something isn't the same as having an interaction or conversation. Kind of questioning and answering things, we get a chance to think and reason and to figure it out. So we're not just grappling with the concept with no understanding behind it, no lore or history behind it. And if you got somebody around that can help you with that and give you some ideas, then it definitely makes a difference. Yeah, my phone's getting really close to dying too. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes roughly that I'm into this. So I may have charged it completely, but I know it's going to tank out here pretty soon. Can they write in English, Cosmic, with chalk or charcoal? I'm sorry you think they're juvenile like chalk. Yes, their juveniles do like chalk and charcoal, and yes, some of them can write in English. Some of them can read English too. Um, and yeah, I've seen that behavior before, but I haven't seen enough examples of it consistently to record it yet. I prefer to see, a half dozen examples. I've only seen 3 or 4 examples of either drawing on rock or writing on rock. Uh, and, and it's always been with either white stone or a chalky stone from a river or a piece of, charcoal from a stick that they'll write on a rock with, and or draw on a rock with, because I've also seen that in some locations. Up in Washington, I found a hand drawn on a rock that was used as a marker. It was done in charcoal, but it was, 5-fingered hand, which is why Native Americans always say, hello, you wave your hand, show that you have 5 fingers, so everybody in the area knows you're not a 6-fingered individual or a 3-fingered individual. You're actually human like them. So the drawing had basically the outline of a human hand. It had a spiral where the muscle should be for this part of the thumb, and then the pinky was drawn separate. It was there, but it was drawn separate of the overall shape of the hand, not drawn as a outline tracing kind of thing. And the representation of the pinky being separate means that the individual understood their lore. And their lore is that they came from a three-toed sloth, a spider sloth, and a Janoskwa, or Ishka, what we call Ishka, what trappers used to call Janoskwa. French trappers called them Janoskwa, male. And they gained, the mother had 3 fingers, the father had 4 fingers, and we became 5-fingered. So the Sabe always draw the image of the hand with the pinky finger separated to indicate the inheritance from the mother, that she had 3 fingers, and we gained a fourth because of our father. So our pinkies actually come from the Ishka, according to their lore and my grandmother's lore and Uncle Ong's lore, all made the same statement. The pinky came from when we came from them, kind of thing. Okay, Cosmic. I've seen their writing on rocks and on their wooden stick structures. Yep. Every once in a while, I'll see that here too. You'll also see patterns picked into the bark of trees, where it looks like they've just used their fingernail to pick apart the tree bark and make an outline. I've also seen it where it looks like they've used some sort of either clay material or dyed with berries, a bare spot on a tree or the bark of a tree to create a pattern or a picture or a design. And it's repeatable. I see that kind of behavior everywhere. Sometimes you see the little cut marks where they're cutting into a tree and they'll make what looks like hashtag marks, etc. Those are all little language marks or generational marks. They tell you specific things. I've seen drawings on rocks. I've seen a lot of that stuff is on trees. Another one that you'll see a lot of is the 3 ghost figures on a tree. And it looks like they either burn them in or they use a pitch to put the ghost marks in. It's just a little round circular with a representation of a neck, a pair of shoulders, and then just drops down to like no feet, no arms, just a little V kind of shaped body. And that's to say there are Comazotes in the area. They're bat people here, or the bat people are welcome there. So that marker is very specific to a particular species of them that they're interacting with. Another marker type. Zachary, if you could give one piece of advice to anyone, what would it be? Know your differences in cryptids. It's very important to understand which ones are red bone people and which ones are safe to be around, which ones are Sabe. So always use your cough. Because red bone people will not respond to it. They will ignore it. And that's a good indicator that you need to leave the area quickly and quietly. Right, Phil? Yes, Cosmic. There is a type of mask that is used by the Sabe. Well, a couple of types of masks, actually. There's the Deer Society mask, which is the front side of a deer skull. You know, the upper half where the eyes are. And then the other mask is a wooden, usually cedar mask with just a pair of holes to represent eyes. Sometimes there'll be a nose represented, but not always. The cedar mask is to scare away the Winnegapi, which giant water otter. They're 12, 15 feet in length. Because those otters, those freshwater otters, are seen as predatory to their babies. When they leave, when a young one drowns, and a young Sabi drowns and they can't find the body, they always assume it is a Winnegapi critter. I think some people call them Winnegapi spirits, but they're actually a physical otter. They're a prehistoric otter that hasn't died out in some areas. And yes, they'll act like a seal around you. They'll come up, they'll bump you, they'll kind of slide along you like a cat or a dog would, you know, when they're rubbing on your leg. But if they take offense to you, they'll also just grab you and take you. So they'll put a cedar mask underwater in an area where a child's gone missing, where they think a Winnegapi has gotten them. So that's one use of the masks. And then the deer mask is Deer Society. So those are the individuals that are being, you know, taught how to use their extra sensory skills. Their third eye, their sixth sense, their unusual running speed, their unusual agility, and they're trained to do these things. You know, they're put in a meditation hut where they get dripped on by water so they can maintain focus. So those things, those kinds of masks are for very specific purposes, and I'm sure there are other types. It's just those are the two that I'm most aware of. And there are some groups that are mask makers, because there is one group in this area where I have found consistently that you know, the one little mask that I show on one of my videos, it's a little wooden mask, it's like 6 inches by 5 inches. That particular family group makes spiritual masks. They make masks to protect. So they're mask makers, and they make ceremonial stuff. I've never been able to get them to trade with me, but they're, uh, there's lots of indications that they're a medicine person group, and that they come specifically to this valley along the river lines down here to trade specific items, and it's always masks. They advertise they're in town and ready for trade with that mask. And you know, there are other groups that come down that same river, and they all advertise in different ways with different symbols. The painted stone that's got the Mississippi riverbed language on it, that shows up at one time of the year for that group to come through and trading. And then you got the mask that comes earlier in the year, and that group trades. There's another group that brings a little root ball. It's choke cherry root that's got a very distinct pattern to it. Looks like a female Bigfoot over like a cooking pot. So that's her emblem, and those are all, I think, medicine people that come, and those particular symbols, those particular identifiers, are always left in a similar spot. Like they all share the same home base camp for their trade. You know, this is where the medicine people trade. This is where we go. This is where we sit. This is where our goods are exchanged. So once you learn some of the movement patterns and what they're moving for, or what they're doing while they're moving, helps you delineate what's going on behavior-wise. Okay, Cosmo, you just mentioned burn-in images and tree trunks. That's a biggie for me. Are they using a laser device or something? No. They typically will paint, from what I was told by my grandmother, they'll paint pitch onto an area and they'll light the pitch on fire and it burns the image into the bark. The other way they will do it is they will use a charcoal stick that has a hot ember and they'll burn directly in and char it. But normally they use pitch because that will seep into the bark and it'll create a thick layer of chalk, caulk, uh, for for the image to stay for a long time. Yes, some will put a burnt piece of wood in their structures, especially if it's like a fishing hut. You know, uh, they're coming to a place to forage for game, and part of the reason why they put the burnt stick in is to indicate that good meals ahead. You know, hey, we're gonna have good bounty. It's kind of a prayer to, you know, if we do this, we'll get that, and we'll get a chance to cook. So it's kind of a prayer and a projection forward for them. You know, good tidings kind of thing. Hey, Cosmic, I've seen that mask you just described. Yeah, it's a pretty common one. The cedar bark mask with two holes. I see that one a lot. I've even found them washed down in rivers and at lake edges at times, because that's something they put underwater as a protective piece. You know, keep the Winnegapi away from us, keep the Winnegapi spirit away from us, keep them away from our children. So it's a protection mask. You know, it's meant to scare away the big otter people, and it's always put wherever a child has died. And I know one lake in particular that's got like 6 or 7 of them in it. And you have to be careful swimming in that particular lake or even going underwater. There's a lot of snag material and down trees and stuff in it. So you can see why, you know, if you're fishing, you might get caught or stuck in an area like that. But there's a bunch of mouse all in the same area, so there's something in that area of the lake that's causing, you know, repeated deaths of young Sabe. And my brother and I both dove down in that lake to check it out. We've never found anything too peculiar except some freshwater stuff, life-wise, that shouldn't be there. So I know that the lake, that particular lake, is incredibly ancient because there shouldn't be freshwater sea anemones, but there are in that lake. They're really tiny, but they're there. And they're not mentioned in the biology books. Go ahead and contact me when you're ready to do that. I'll have to set my settings on those particular videos that you want to utilize, to let you allow you to use them. I've been putting it on no remixing because I had a few kookaboos that have been being dumb, and I kind of want to just dissuade that. So, you know, when you get ready to utilize anything of my clips, any of my videos, etc., if you want to do something out of this, just let me know and I'll take the restrictions off for you for a while so you can collect that information. Yeah, my email's on my about, so you know, be pretty easy to contact me. Okay. Bearman, I know. Sculpts large root balls into his image. Ah, that would be cool to see. I haven't seen that yet. I have had some natives say that though to me that they make some pretty interesting things. Uh, but then I've seen some other peculiar stuff too. You know, carvings in tree bark or sometimes one of the weirdest things I found is I'll find like a little rudimentary ball of clay that's not clean, and it'll be stuck at the bottom of a tree, and it'll be made into a mask shape. It'll be a face, or it'll be an image with a nose and a pair of eyes, but I don't see it very often. And I've oftentimes wondered, if that's some sort of a Sabe thing, because I've never really found any indication that it's a person, and they're in such random locations. Makes me wonder if it's some Sabe kid playing, having to go home and left his play item stuck to the tree. Wow, sounds like you've got a lot in your area, Phil. Okay, poeticism. You need to go out, baby. Are the otter people known to pop their heads out of the water and stare at you? I haven't seen that behavior out of them. There's one that comes to this area uh, every once in a while, and there's a particular part of one of the local rivers that they come to. Um, if you get the little thing that pops its head up like a foot or two above the water, it's got a very flat-looking head with kind of a narrow neck. That's not an otter person. That's not a Winagape. That's a plesiosaur. But or plesiosaur type could be a young one. But the behavior that a smaller otter has is very similar to the behavior of a larger otter. Um, they have very similar play tactics. They have very similar sleeping tactics. It's just the Winagapi are far more singular. They're solo. They don't usually pack interact as much as otters do. Otter families will stay together for a while, and the young ones will interact with mom, etc., for quite some time. But from what I understand of the Winagapi, they're more independent. They don't, unless you're probably in their area. Might be different if you're in their area. But the one that comes through this area is kind of doing a migratorial thing, I think, or assisting a Sabe family that he's attached to, because I'm pretty sure he's a working pet or an assistant pet, because there's the indication that he's hauling goods up and down the river. So he's got a little stirrup that he wears, and he pulls goods behind him in a big woven bag, usually made out of basic material out of the local area, elm bark or some other way that you can make a tied net, and it will stay together and not rot in water. Elm is really good for that. The inner bark, soft fiber bark from the inner side of a elm tree will last in water for several years without eroding too horribly bad. Especially if you, there goes my battery. Especially if you salt cure it. And somebody did ask me, is salt something that's good to give as a gift? Yes, because they can use salt to cure certain things and to tan hides, preserve stuff, and they have to collect it from the sea or from a cave system somewhere, or from some sort of a dried area like salt flats. Um, So salt being readily available to them is going to be something they might be interested in actually. Because my grandmother claimed that the urine would steal salt, along with some other particular house items, but salt was one of the things they would take. Because they'd come into the house and steal from my grandmother's parents and the family. They'd take what they wanted and leave. That's part of the reason why they actually ended up moving into town because the Urine family were raiding their house too often and disturbing their sleep. Well, the reason why some people don't see them is because your mind has to be open and your heart has to be good. If you don't have an open mind and good heart, the only one you're going to run across are the red bone people. So you got a good heart, Bill. Oh, Poeticism. Yeah, you live in Newport, Oregon. Ever been, ever been this way? Yes, I have. Have you ever seen anything around this area? If you have been here or know anyone that knows about things around this area. Well, all the way from Florence to Newport, around Depot Bay area, there's a whole bunch of Sasquatch all through that area. Um, there's also up along the Columbia River Gorge a bunch of stuff that's Sasquatchy. And you've also got Clyde, the you know, flippered little dino that comes up and down in that area. And you also have a potential other, more Jurassic south of Newport. There's an echo bowl that every once in a while a foghorn gets a answer, and it's not an echo. It's something for you to check out if you're in Newport. Uh, go down to your South Jetty area when the foghorns are going off and see if you hear something that is not echoing, but has a similar sound, and that's a T-Rex. And there are plenty of stories about that from native culture, but not in settler culture. And my dad actually used to take me to that area and claim the same thing. He'd say, "Oh, listen to the foghorn. Now listen to the echo. Okay, now identify that sound. Now tell me when it's not that sound. When you hear a responsive roar or a responsive sound and it's not an echo, and you will hear it. It would be really nice if somebody could make some recordings of that because it's pretty loud when it happens. You can audibly hear it for quite some distance." Yeah, you're welcome, Cosmic. But my phone is dying. Does Sabi have two Benagapi on top of windpipe? Oh, do Sabi have two windpipes on top of their head? Depends. Are you talking about an aquatic thing or something that runs on land? Because there's a Dilophosaurus? There is something that has bugler pipes. My grandmother talked about them. But it's another dino type. It's a historic animal. And they're quite sentient. They evidently are one of the creatures that we learn to speak from because of the sounds that they make and some of the songs that they sing according to, the lore of my family. Oh, oh, thank you guys. I really love you guys. I really appreciate you. Have a great night. Thank you so much for attending. And definitely, if you haven't checked out Steve, Isdall's channel, go check him out. He's got uh, really interesting stuff that's brought in. You know, people email him all the time, and they really give some good details to their emails sometimes. And I know he's got a really good heart. I think he's a great guy, and I'm thankful for the people that have come from his channel to view my work. I appreciate you, and I really appreciate the interest. And I know that if you got any, tracking experience, you'll understand, you know, and be able to note things differently and potentially in a better way than other people could because you've got some experience behind you. Okay. Post I'm going to have to, yeah, go to listen for that. Yeah, I would because that's one I would love to be able to go and get some recordings, but just don't have enough time with everything else I'm doing, and I'm not too sure my vehicle would make it over the hills anyway. It's pretty gutless in a lot of ways, but it's better, way better now that I've gotten that cable fixed. That frayed cable was really making it hard for that vehicle to run. It's running a heck of a lot better. I feel a little bit more confident in it now. But I'm still not too sure how it's going to do in much of the way of hillsides. You know, I've got to gear down to 2 to get over most hillsides, and I know one's going to be crawling me over the hillsides at about freaking 10 miles an hour. So, anyway, have a great night, everyone. Thank you so much for attending, and I'm really glad that everybody's so interested in this, and I really love my subscribers. You guys are awesome. You're open-minded, you're open-hearted, and you're very dedicated souls, and I really appreciate that. I just want to see more of you. You know, I want more of your type of people here because I think you got the reasoning power to figure things out, and I think you have the knowledge base and the background to figure things out. And I'm also fully aware that you're willing to do a little research and put work on your own. I really appreciate that. The more of us that can do that, the sooner we can come to some answers that are going to be cohesive. So thank you, everyone. You have a great morning and have a great weekend and enjoy it. And talk to you later. Bye for now.